My son looked me straight in the eye that winter night and said, "Don't come anymore, Dad. You're not welcome here." Those words fell like a blade, cutting through my chest, while outside the window, Christmas snow came down heavy and white. I once believed that warm house behind him was built from love and sacrifice. But in a single sentence, every memory, every drop of sweat I had poured into it, turned to ash. Have you ever been rejected by the very person you love most, to realize that sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers, but from the very blood you once held in your arms? Before I tell you how I carried out the sweetest revenge of my life, let me ask you, have you ever been hurt by family? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to tell me where you're listening from, so we can see that this kind of pain isn't just ours. It exists everywhere. And don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next sweet revenge stories. Trust me, what comes next is something you'll never forget. The Spokane sky was dark and heavy, snowflakes slicing through the deserted streets. I parked my old silver pickup at the end of the cul-de-sac where Ryan lived, a modern neighborhood lined with postcard-perfect homes, wreaths on the doors, LED lights flickering red and gold. It should have felt warm, but an unease gnawed at me, colder than the wind sneaking through my coat. I carried a small box wrapped in red paper, tied with a gold ribbon. Inside was a bottle of rare whiskey Maria, my late wife, and I had saved for our 40th anniversary. She had passed 8 years ago, taking half my heart with her. I'd kept the bottle sealed ever since, like a relic of love and family. Tonight, I thought, I would give it to Ryan. I would tell him about his mother, about how she believed family was worth more than gold, and remind him that blood was stronger than any tradition. My boots crunched on the icy steps. I inhaled, steadying myself. It's Christmas. He's my son. Whatever distance has grown, tonight it will melt away, I whispered to myself. The door opened. Ryan stood there. Short brown hair neat, face still resembling the boy I once walked to school. But his eyes stopped me cold. No joy, no welcome, only tension, avoidance. "Dad?" Ryan's voice trailed. I smiled, lifting the box. "Merry Christmas, son. I brought you something special." He didn't take it. His shoulders stiffened, his breath shallow. Then, in a rush of words, he said, "Don't come anymore, Dad. You're not welcome here." The words slammed into me, heavier than the wind howling behind my back. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard. Maybe the storm muffled his tone, maybe I was too tired. I searched his eyes, waiting for a grin to break through, for him to say, "I'm kidding, Dad." But no. Ryan's gaze dropped to the polished hardwood floors I had paid for last spring. Behind him, the Christmas tree gleamed, 3 meters tall, crowned with a silver star, ribbons glimmering under warm lights. A perfect tree, funded by my hands. The box in my grip grew unbearably heavy. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. "What do you mean, Ryan? Why am I not welcome?" His tongue darted across dry lips. "You know, Sophia, her parents, they're coming. They want it their way. You know how much they value tradition." "Tradition?" I echoed, my voice rough. "And in that tradition, the father who built this house with his sweat has no seat at the Christmas table?" Ryan stayed silent. His hands clenched, then unclenched, then clenched again. He couldn't look at me. In that moment, it was as if a fist crushed my chest. Everything inside that house, the silk drapes I paid for when Sophia complained of privacy, the leather sofa I bought after draining my savings because the old one didn't match, the hardwood floors refinanced on my credit, all of it testified to one truth. I had built my own exclusion. I wanted to shout, to list every dollar I'd given, to scream, "What about love? What about blood?" But all that escaped was a trembling sigh, thin as wind through a cracked door. Ryan whispered again, softer, almost pleading. I'm sorry, Dad. It's just easier if you're not here. Easier. That word cut deeper than the rest. Easier for him not to face judgment from his in-laws. Easier for Sophia not to fake a smile in my presence. Easier for her parents not to sully their dinner with the company of a man they looked down upon. My hand found the doorknob, icy to the touch. Behind me, Ryan's voice faltered, calling my name, but the door shut quietly, sealing me outside. Snow fell heavier, coating my shoulders. The glow from his windows spilled faintly into the night, mocking me with its warmth. Ahead stretched only darkness. I trudged back to my pickup, the snow crunching louder than my heartbeat. My fingers fumbled with the handle as I slid inside, the cab colder than my bones. I set the box on the passenger seat. Through the frosted glass, I thought I saw Ryan's shadow lingering at the curtain. But then it vanished. The drapes pulled tight. He had chosen his world. And in that world, I no longer existed. The engine coughed awake, the heater groaning. My breath fogged the windshield before I wiped it clear with my sleeve. I shifted into gear, tires grinding over the icy road. Each turn led me deeper into memories. At 29th and Grand, the red light stopped me. On the opposite corner, a young father loaded gifts into a sleek SUV. Two small faces pressed against the fogged window, eyes wide with excitement. My chest tightened. That was once Ryan, eyes sparkling, asking me where his present was. A lifetime ago. I remembered Maria. Every Christmas, she decorated our tree with ornaments barely worth $1, but priceless with memories. She would beam when we placed the handmade star on top, whispering that nothing mattered more than family gathered under one roof. Her laugh was the music of those nights. Now, the roof was still there, but without her, and without my son's welcome. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator harder than necessary. The pickup roared, surging forward into the storm. I began counting in my head, as if punishing myself. $3,000 a month for 5 years straight. $18,000. Add the down payment, the renovations, the utilities I covered. Over $2,000, more than Maria and I had saved for retirement. And what did I get in return? A sentence. Don't come anymore, Dad. I passed Lincoln Street, the bank's neon sign flickering. That was where I'd signed the second mortgage on my own home, just to fund Ryan's. The young loan officer had looked at me with pity, asking, "Are you sure, Mr. Miller? This is a huge risk for your retirement." I had smiled, convinced I was investing in my son's future. Little did I know, I was signing my own eviction notice. The truck rattled as I turned into my old neighborhood. My house appeared, porch light flickering, concrete driveway cracked, repairs I had postponed, because every spare dollar had been siphoned into Ryan and Sophia's suburban dream. I shut off the engine. Silence pressed down. Inside, the house was dark, hollow. No Maria humming carols, no laughter echoing through the walls. Only me, 63 years old, sitting in the ruins of sacrifice. My phone buzzed. Sophia's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. I was done listening to her syrupy voice, the one she used only when asking for money. I sat heavily on the worn armchair, the box still on my lap. Slowly, I peeled the paper away. The whiskey bottle gleamed under the dim lamp. I remembered the night Maria died. I had almost opened it, then stopped, saving it for a more special occasion. That occasion never came. The only one who made life special was gone. Tears blurred my vision. Yet beneath the sorrow, something else sparked. Hotter, sharper. Not grief, not despair, but anger. Ryan could shut me out of his home, but he could never erase the truth. I had built that life for him. Every brick, every light, every inch carried my fingerprint. And if he thought I would remain silent, financing my own humiliation, he was wrong. I inhaled deeply. The room was still cold, but inside me, a fire had ignited. A decision formed, steady and undeniable. A decision that would change everything. The kitchen table in my house had always been meant for family dinners. Maria had once insisted on buying it second-hand, sanding it down, painting it white so that it would shine beneath the modest chandelier she loved. For years, it bore the weight of meals, laughter, the clutter of Ryan's school projects, and later, Maria's holiday decorations. Now it bore the weight of paper. Bank statements, mortgage agreements, utility bills addressed not to me, but to my son and his wife, yet paid with money siphoned from my account. Each sheet of paper was crisp, official, and cold. But to me, it felt like a scar across my heart. I spread them out one evening after that fateful rejection, as if laying evidence on a courtroom table. And in a way, it was evidence. Proof that for 5 long years, I had subsidized a life I was not allowed to share. Proof that love, when one-sided, becomes a contract written in invisible ink and paid in silence. I traced my finger along the first statement. $40,000. The down payment for Ryan and Sophia's house. I had written the check in my own shaky hand, watching the ink bleed into the paper as though it were blood. At the time, I called it an investment. An investment in my son's stability, in his family's future. I told myself that Maria would have done the same, that she would have smiled and said, "That's what parents are for." But Maria was gone. She hadn't been there to shake her head, to remind me of the retirement account we had built together, of the vacations we had promised ourselves in our 60s, of the quiet mornings we had dreamed of spending on a porch with no debts to our names. She wasn't there to argue, to balance my foolish heart with her practical wisdom. And so, when Ryan came to me with his plea, I had only my loneliness to guide me. I remember that day vividly. Ryan had come to my house with Sophia at his side. She was dressed impeccably, as always, her nails manicured, her perfume a cloud that entered the room before she did. Ryan looked nervous, like the little boy who once needed me to sign his field trip forms. "Dad," he began, "we found the house. It's perfect. Close to Sophia's parents, good schools, safe neighborhood. It's everything we need to start our life together." Sophia smiled, her hand resting on Ryan's arm, as though to steady him. But her eyes weren't on me. They were on the photos she had pulled up on her phone. "It's a beautiful property," she said sweetly. "But the down payment is, well, it's more than we expected. And the bank." She hesitated, then looked straight at me. "They said we'd qualify if we could show an additional $47,000 up front. Just a bridge. Until Ryan's career takes off. Just a bridge." That phrase would haunt me. Bridges are supposed to lead you somewhere. But this one led me into debt, into servitude, into exile. I remember the silence that filled the room after her words. Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew what he was asking. He knew what it meant. "Dad," he finally whispered, "we'll pay you back, I swear. This is just so we can get started." I should have said no. I should have reminded him that Maria and I had scraped for decades to put away a retirement fund, that I couldn't afford to gamble at my age. But instead, I saw Maria's ghost behind Ryan's shoulders, smiling her soft smile, whispering, "Help him, he's our son." So I nodded. And that night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing the conversation I would have with the bank the next day. Walking into the bank felt like walking into a confessional. The young loan officer looked at me with professional pity as I explained what I needed. A second mortgage. A loan against the house Maria and I had built together. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Miller?" he asked gently. "It's a big risk at your age." I chuckled, though it sounded hollow even to me. "It's for my son. What's risk compared to family?" He didn't answer, just pushed the papers across the desk. I signed, my hand trembling, each stroke of the pen feeling like I was erasing Maria's dreams. I walked out with the check. Ryan hugged me tightly when I handed it to him. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered. Sophia's thank you was more polished. A quick kiss on the cheek, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I told myself it was worth it. That they would remember. That they would build a home where I would always be welcome. I was wrong. Months later came the furniture. Sophia called one evening, her voice dripping with honey. "Edward, the house is lovely, but the old furniture just doesn't fit. The colors are all wrong. We were thinking of getting a new set, something more sophisticated, just to match the space." I should have laughed. I should have told her that the sofa Maria and I had given them was more than good enough. But Ryan's voice cut in, quieter, almost apologetic. "Dad, she's right. It's just, we want the place to feel like a real home. We'll pay you back, I promise." And so, I reached again into my savings. I sold tools I hadn't touched in years, the ones Maria had once teased me for hoarding. I gave up the vacation I had tentatively planned for the following summer. And in return, a delivery truck rolled up to their driveway, unloading leather sofas, marble coffee tables, and a bed frame that cost more than the car I drove. When I visited a week later, Sophia gave me a tour. She pointed out the granite countertops, the polished wood, the imported rug. She said, "We bought them." She never said my name. Ryan trailed behind, silent as though ashamed, but not ashamed enough to stop. Then came the monthly payments. $3,000 due on the 15th of every month, like clockwork. At first, I treated it like a bill, just another obligation, like water or electricity. But over time, it grew heavier. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, calculator in hand, trying to stretch my modest pension and side jobs to cover the transfers. I stopped buying new clothes. I started shopping at discount grocery stores. Peanut butter sandwiches became my daily lunch. I told myself it was temporary, that Ryan would catch up, that Sophia would appreciate the sacrifice. But months turned into years. 5 years, 60 payments, $18,000. Every time I logged into my bank account, I felt the weight of Maria's absence. She would have seen it coming. She would have stopped me. Instead, her photo on the mantel seemed to watch silently as I drained the life we had built together into someone else's marble kitchen. It was during the second year of payments when Ryan came to me again, his shoulders slumped, his eyes darting everywhere but my face. I recognized that look. It was the same one he had worn as a boy when he broke a neighbor's window with his baseball. "Dad," he murmured, "I lost my job." The words felt heavier than bricks. He explained quickly, stumbling over excuses. The company had downsized. He was on the wrong project. It wasn't his fault. He would find something soon. Sophia was there too, her arms crossed, lips pursed. "We can't fall behind on the mortgage," she said, her tone clipped. "Missing even one payment would ruin our credit. That's not an option." Her eyes bored into me, sharp and expectant. She didn't have to ask. The implication hung thick in the air. "You'll cover it, won't you?" And I did. Of course I did. I remember calling the bank that night, authorizing yet another transfer, the numbers leaving my account like blood from an open vein. I told myself it was temporary, just until Ryan got back on his feet. But months passed, and each time I asked how the job search was going, Ryan mumbled something vague, and Sophia would change the subject to the new oven she wanted, or the landscaping she thought was necessary for curb appeal. Sophia had a way of speaking that made her desires sound like necessities. "The neighbors all have updated kitchens," she once said, flipping through a glossy magazine. "Ours looks outdated. It's embarrassing when we host." Or, "The bathroom tiles are cracked. Guests notice these things." Or simply, "This neighborhood has a standard, Edward. Don't you want your son to live up to it?" Each statement was dressed as concern for Ryan, but I knew the truth. It wasn't about him. It was about her pride, her image, her hunger for a life that sparkled on the surface, even if it was rotting underneath. And Ryan, my son, just nodded along. He had grown quieter, more distant, as if each demand from her pulled him further from me. He didn't protest, didn't defend me when I hesitated. He just let her voice fill the silence. So I paid. Again and again. Granite countertops. A professional-grade mixer she used twice before shoving into a cabinet. An imported chandelier that cost more than my monthly pension. Every receipt was another nail in the coffin of my financial freedom. Whenever I felt doubt creep in, I turned to Maria's photograph on the mantel. She had been the voice of reason in our marriage, but also the embodiment of kindness. She believed in giving, in helping others, but she also knew the value of limits. I could almost hear her whispering, "Edward, don't let them take everything. Save something for yourself. Save something for us." But she wasn't there to stop me. Her absence left a hollow space where caution used to live. And in that hollow, guilt grew. Guilt that I hadn't saved her, that she had died too young, that I was still here when she wasn't. Paying for Ryan and Sophia's life became, in some twisted way, penance. I told myself Maria would approve, that she would smile and say, "You did the right thing, helping our boy." But deep down, I knew better. She would have seen through Sophia in an instant. She would have sat Ryan down and demanded he stand on his own 2 feet. She would have protected me from my own weakness. By the 3rd year, the payments had become ritual. On the 15th of each month, I would sit at my kitchen table, the same one Maria had painted, and log into my account. I would watch the balance shrink as the transfer went out. $3,000 disappearing into a house where I was becoming less welcome. I adjusted my life around it. I stopped eating out. I clipped coupons from the Sunday paper like a man drowning who clings to driftwood. I walked past shop windows without looking inside. The small luxuries Maria and I had once promised ourselves in retirement. Travel, a new set of golf clubs for me, a pottery class for her. They all vanished, line by line, under the weight of obligations that weren't mine. And yet, every time, I told myself the same lie. This is for family. This is what love looks like. But love shouldn't feel like chains. The first Christmas without Maria had been unbearable. Ryan was still young then, not yet married, and he clung to me in his grief. We lit the tree together, shared stories of her, and promised to keep her memory alive. But as the years passed, that promise faded. Christmases in Ryan's new home felt like performances, orchestrated by Sophia. Perfect decor, perfect menus, perfect guests. Maria's handmade ornaments never made it onto their tree. Her recipes were dismissed as too heavy. Her name was rarely spoken. And yet, I kept paying. I kept telling myself that keeping the house afloat meant keeping a piece of her dream alive. I thought I was preserving family. In reality, I was erasing myself. Every bill carried emotion. The mortgage statement wasn't just numbers. It was a reminder of Ryan's silence, of Sophia's demands, of Maria's absence. The receipts for furniture weren't just proof of purchases. They were proof of how far I had strayed from the life Maria and I once built. I began to feel hollow. Each payment stripped away not just money, but dignity. I was no longer a father, not even a man. I was a wallet with a pulse, an ATM disguised in grief. And the cruelest part? They didn't see it. Or worse, they did, and they didn't care. The night after Ryan told me not to come for Christmas, the phone rang. The screen lit up with Sophia's name. I should have ignored it. But something in me, a mixture of anger and masochism, compelled me to answer. "Edward?" Her voice dripped with that familiar saccharine tone, the one she used when she wanted something. "I heard about the misunderstanding with Ryan." Misunderstanding. That was her word. As if my son exiling me from his home on Christmas was nothing more than a scheduling error. "There was no misunderstanding," I said flatly. She sighed. The kind of sigh people make when they think they're speaking to someone beneath them. "You have to understand my parents' perspective. They're very traditional. They expect a certain atmosphere during the holidays. You know, intellectual conversations, refined cuisine, a cultured environment." Her words hit like fists. Refined, cultured, intellectual. All the things I apparently was not. I forced my voice steady. And what is it you think I bring to the table, Sophia? There was a pause, and then she said it. The words that would echo in my skull for days. Honestly, you bring noise. Your food is too heavy. Your stories are too provincial. My parents are educated people. They don't want to sit through talk about construction jobs and tamales. It's embarrassing. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Maria's tamales had once been Ryan's favorite meal. He had begged for them every birthday. And now they were embarrassing. I swallowed hard. Maria's cooking built this family, I whispered. Sophia laughed softly, cruelly. Please. She was a housewife who knew her place. At least she didn't cause scenes. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't even hang up. Instead, I let the silence stretch until it became heavier than words. Sophia prattled on about her parents, about standards, about appearances. I barely heard her. My mind was elsewhere, spinning through years of swallowed insults, quiet humiliations, endless sacrifices. 8 years of biting my tongue since Maria died. 5 years of funneling my life savings into a house where I wasn't welcome. Dozens of holidays where I smiled politely while Sophia's family made backhanded comments about working-class grit and simple charm. And Ryan, my own son, never once defended me. As Sophia continued, my body went still. My heartbeat slowed. The rage that had always boiled hot inside me cooled into something sharper, colder. It was no longer anger. It was clarity. When she finally stopped talking, I spoke only 4 words. We're done, Sophia. Then I ended the call. I sat at my kitchen table long into the night. The house was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your skin. Before me lay years of evidence. Stacks of bank statements, copies of mortgage payments, receipts for furniture and renovations. I arranged them chronologically. Year 1, $303,600. Year 2, $303,600 more. By year 3, I'd stopped buying new clothes. By year 4, I was eating dollar store meals. Year 5, I was skipping doctor's appointments because copays were too high. In total, $103,400. Not counting the down payment. Not counting the credit card debts I had taken on. Nearly $250,000. Money Maria and I had saved. Money meant for our future. Gone. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. Every line item was a cut, every check a wound. Together, they told a story of a man who had mistaken servitude for love. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel it. Not just the sorrow, but the betrayal. I had been used. Not just by Sophia, but by Ryan too. My son had let it happen. At 11:47 p.m., I picked up the phone and dialed the bank. The automated system chirped in a cheerful voice. Thank you for calling Wells Fargo. For English, press 1. I pressed 1. Customer service, this is Jennifer. How may I help you tonight? I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said. My voice was steady, almost eerily calm. Of course, Mr. Miller. Can I have your account number? I read it off. She tapped keys on the other end. I see here, $3,000 transferred monthly on the 15th to an account ending in 7423. How long have you been making these transfers? 5 years. And you'd like to cancel immediately? Yes. She paused. Are you sure, sir? I looked around my dim kitchen. The peeling paint, the broken porch light, the empty chair across from me where Maria used to sit. Yes, I said firmly. Effective immediately. All right, Mr. Miller. The transfer has been canceled. I hung up the phone. Silence filled the house, but it was a new kind of silence. Not heavy, not suffocating. Free. For the first time in years, my budget would balance. For the first time since Maria died, I had chosen myself. I gathered the bank statements, the receipts, the evidence of my martyrdom, and carried them to the fireplace. One by one, I fed them to the flames. The paper curled, blackened, turned to ash. The fire's warmth kissed my face, warmer than I had felt in years. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Ryan, then another from Sophia. I didn't check them. Instead, I went to the cabinet and pulled down the whiskey bottle Maria and I had saved. My hands trembled as I uncorked it, the scent rising like memory. I poured a glass, lifted it toward her photo on the mantel, and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Maria." I finally stopped saving his wallet. The whiskey burned my throat, but it felt like freedom. 3 days after I had canceled the transfers, my phone rang again. Sophia. I let it buzz twice, debating whether to ignore it. But some stubborn part of me wanted to hear what she could possibly want now, after everything she had said. I pressed accept. "Edward," she began without preamble, her voice already sharp with impatience. "My parents are flying in from Portland tomorrow. Their flight arrives at 2 o'clock, Alaska Airlines. Baggage claim Carousel 3. You'll pick them up." I sat in silence, letting her words hang in the air. She mistook my silence for agreement and barreled on. "Wear something decent. Maybe that blue shirt you wore to Ryan's graduation. They notice things like that. And for God's sake, handle their luggage properly. Don't embarrass us." Finally, I spoke. "Did you forget our conversation the other night?" A pause, then a scoff. "Whatever that was about. We need to focus on practical matters now. My parents need transportation, and you're the only one with time during the day. That's what family does, Edward. They help each other." The audacity left me breathless. Less than 72 hours after she told me I wasn't welcome at their Christmas table, she expected me to serve as her parents' chauffeur. I smiled into the receiver, though she couldn't see it. "Of course, Sophia," I said quietly. "I'll take care of everything." "Good," she replied briskly. "Don't be late." And she hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand for a long time, the corners of my mouth lifting into a slow, deliberate smile. For the first time in years, I felt not anger, not humiliation, but control. The next afternoon, 2 o'clock came and went. I was not at Spokane International Airport. I was in my armchair, sipping Earl Grey tea, the newspaper spread across my lap. The crossword from the day before lay half finished, but now I had time to complete it. At 2:47, my phone buzzed. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. At 3:15, another call, this time an unknown number, probably her parents, borrowing a stranger's phone. I smiled and set the phone face down on the table. By 3:45, the buzzing was constant. Sophia again. Then, the unknown number. Back and forth, a frantic duet of entitlement. I unplugged the landline and switched my cell off entirely. Silence, at last. I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup. Comfort food. I hadn't allowed myself these small luxuries in years, too busy funneling money into their bottomless pit. The cheese melted golden, the soup steamed in my favorite mug. It tasted better than any Christmas feast I'd attended in that marble palace of theirs. Somewhere across town, 3 people were probably fuming in an airport parking garage, arguing over taxi fares, wondering how their driver could be so irresponsible. The thought made my soup taste even better. The pounding began at dusk. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of violent hammering that rattles the doorframe. I set down my tea, already knowing who it was. When I opened the door, I was greeted by 3 furious faces. Cody and Catherine Jenkins, red with rage, and Sophia, makeup smeared, hair disheveled. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Cody bellowed, barging past me into the living room without invitation. Catherine followed, her lips pressed into a hard line. "This is completely unacceptable," she hissed. "We waited at that airport for hours. Hours. Do you have any idea how barbaric that is, Edward?" Sophia slammed the door behind her. "You humiliated us. You humiliated me. My parents had to take a $40 taxi because you decided to, what? Take a nap?" Their voices overlapped in a chorus of outrage. But then I spoke, quietly, calmly, and the room fell silent. This is my house, and I want you out. Cody jabbed a finger toward me. You don't get to make demands here, old man. Not after what you pulled today. I met his glare, unflinching. The lesson is over. You can leave. He leaned in close, his voice a low growl. You have no idea who you're messing with. I know people in this city. Important people. People who can ruin you. Catherine's smile was sharp as glass. Indeed. Actions have consequences, Edward. Yours will be very public. Sophia tugged at her father's arm. Daddy, let's just go. He's pathetic. He's not worth it. But Cody paused at the threshold, turning back. His eyes glittered with malice. You'll regret this. I guarantee it. Then they were gone, their voices echoing into the night as they piled into a rental car. I locked the door behind them, the deadbolt clicking with satisfying finality. The house felt cleaner without them, though their parting threats lingered like smoke. 3 mornings later, I unfolded the Spokane Review and nearly dropped my coffee. My face stared back at me from page 3. The headline screamed, Spokane businessman abandons elderly couple at airport during holiday storm. I read the article twice, then a third time. Cody and Catherine Jenkins were painted as helpless victims. An elderly couple stranded for 4 hours in frigid conditions, while I was cast as the unstable, cruel relative who had snapped without warning. They claimed they had been left in dangerous weather, though I recalled clearly that the day had been 52 degrees and sunny. They spoke of erratic behavior, of concerns for my mental state. Not a word about the 5 years of financial support. Not a mention of the Christmas dinner banishment. No context, no truth, just a caricature of me as a heartless old man. I set the paper down slowly, my pulse hammering. They had declared war. I sat there for a long time, the newspaper spread across the table like a crime scene. My own face stared back at me, eyes frozen in an outdated photograph stolen from a company website years ago. Beneath it, words painted me as a villain, erratic, unstable, unfit for family gatherings. Each phrase was a blade, carving away at the man I had built myself to be. I was no longer Edward Miller, the man who had worked 35 years in construction, who had built homes and paid taxes, who had raised a son and buried a wife with dignity. No. To the city of Spokane, I was now a headline. A cruel old man who abandoned an elderly couple in a holiday storm. I could almost hear the whispers already. At the grocery store, at church, among neighbors who had once nodded politely at me. Did you read about him? What kind of father does that? I pressed my palms flat against the table, the paper crinkling beneath them. My breath came in shallow bursts. For years I had swallowed humiliation in private, allowed myself to be diminished inside the walls of my own home. But this was different. This was public execution. They hadn't just taken my money. They were taking my name. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I paced the house, each step echoing in the emptiness Maria used to fill. Her photo on the mantel caught the glow of the street light, and for a moment I thought I saw disapproval in her eyes. Maria, I whispered, voice breaking. I tried to hold us together. I thought sacrifice would buy me love. But look where it's left me. Tears welled, hot and furious. For the first time since she died, I spoke to her aloud, my voice rising, cracking. They've turned me into a monster. They've stolen everything, even my dignity. And I let them. I collapsed into the armchair, chest heaving, fists clenched. The rage was overwhelming, but beneath it pulsed something steadier, a heartbeat of clarity. Enough. They had underestimated me. They thought I would roll over, accept the shame, disappear quietly. But I was not finished, not yet. I rose and went to the desk in the corner. pulled out a manila folder, laid it on the table. One by one, I began filling it with evidence. Bank statements, canceled checks, receipts for furniture and renovations, printouts of social media posts where Sophia bragged about purchases paid for with my sacrifice. Each piece of paper was a weapon. Each line item, a bullet of truth. By dawn, the folder was thick enough to choke a horse, and my resolve was set. They wanted to play in public? Fine. I would take the fight there. Not with shouting, not with fists, but with the one thing they couldn't manipulate. The truth. The manila folder sat on my desk like a live grenade. Every time I looked at it, I felt both fear and power. Inside was the truth. 5 years of sacrifice, documented down to the cent. If the newspaper wanted to paint me as cruel and unstable, I would answer with facts. But it wasn't just about defending myself anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity. About showing Ryan, Sophia, and the entire city that Edward Miller was not a doormat. Not a broken old man to be discarded when inconvenient. For days I planned. I mapped out connections. I noted which guests Sophia had bragged about inviting to Christmas dinner. Business associates, neighbors, church friends. They all deserved to know the truth. I prepared copies of my documents for each of them. 12 neat stacks, tied with string, evidence packages ready for delivery. The thought filled me with a strange calm. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about rage. It was about clarity, about balance, about restoring what had been taken. On the night of December 24th, Spokane glittered with holiday lights. Families gathered around fireplaces, laughter spilling into the cold air. And across town, in that marble-trimmed house, Sophia and Ryan were hosting their grand Christmas feast. I parked across the street at 6:45 p.m., dressed in my best navy suit, the one I had worn to Maria's funeral. My briefcase sat in the passenger seat, stuffed with the truth. Through the window, I could see them. Sophia flitting about like a queen bee, Ryan trailing behind her, Cody and Catherine holding court at the table. Guests raised glasses, laughter rising and falling. I inhaled deeply, steadied my hands, and stepped into the cold. The front door was unlocked, of course. Sophia always boasted about how safe their neighborhood was. I pushed it open and walked inside. Conversation died instantly. 12 faces turned toward me. Forks paused in midair. Sophia's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Ryan's face drained of color. "Good evening," I said evenly, setting my briefcase on the marble sideboard. "I hope you don't mind me joining your Christmas celebration." "Edward, this is inappropriate," Sophia snapped, recovering first. "You need to leave." "On the contrary," I said, opening the briefcase. "I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this house, this dinner, this lifestyle you've been showing off." Murmurs rippled around the table. A woman leaned forward, curious. I began distributing the packets, one by one. "Here are the bank records. 5 years of mortgage payments, $68,000. Add the down payment, renovations, furniture, $250,000, paid by me." The room was silent except for the rustle of papers. I watched as eyes widened, as lips tightened. A man muttered, "This is outrageous." Sophia's voice trembled. "He volunteered. We never asked." I cut her off, pulling out the newspaper article. And here is what they told the media about me. That I abandoned them in a storm, that I was unstable. Lies, all lies, while they bled me dry. Gasps. Disbelief. Cody's face turned crimson. Catherine's hand shook as she clutched her wine glass. "This man has serious mental health issues," Cody stammered. I held up my phone, scrolling through screenshots of Sophia's posts. Her beautiful home, her perfect Christmas, her $2,000 appliances bought with my money. "The only issue here is arrogance," I said, "and exploitation." The guests looked at each other, shame and disgust flickering in their eyes, not at me, but at my accusers. When I left that night, their perfect image was in ruins. Voices rose behind me, accusations flying, their carefully built facade collapsing like a house of cards. I walked into the cold air, briefcase lighter, heart lighter still. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I could still build. Maria had always believed legacy wasn't about money, but about love, respect, and truth. I had spent years mistaking sacrifice for love, servitude for respect. But now, standing under the winter stars, I felt a new purpose settling into my bones. My legacy would not be the money I had given away. It would be the dignity I reclaimed, the story I told, the truth I left behind for anyone willing to listen. I walked back to my truck, whispered to Maria's memory, "I'm done being their wallet. From now on, I'll be myself again." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The morning after Christmas Eve, I woke with an unfamiliar sensation, lightness. For years, I had carried the crushing weight of guilt, obligation, and shame. Now, though my enemies had tried to smear me in the paper, I felt strangely free. The world hadn't ended. I was still here. And for once, I wasn't waiting for their next demand. I brewed coffee, Colombian blend, the good kind I had once denied myself because it felt too expensive. I sat by the window as the winter sun filtered through. My house was still modest, still worn, but for the first time in years, it felt like it was mine. Later that week, my neighbor Rosa knocked on the door. She had always been kind, inviting me to family dinners, checking on me after Maria died. I had declined most invitations, ashamed of how hollow I'd become. "Edward," she said gently, "we're making tamales for New Year's. The kids want you to come. They call you Grandpa Ed behind your back, you know." The words cracked something inside me. I almost cried right there on the porch. Instead, I smiled. "I'll be there," I whispered. And I was. That night, surrounded by laughter and messy hands full of masa dough, I felt Maria's presence more vividly than I had in years. Not in Sophia's polished dining room, not in the house I had bankrolled, but here, among people who loved me simply because I showed up. Legacy, I realized, was not the granite countertop in someone else's kitchen. It was in the memories you built with those who valued you. Weeks later, the fallout from Christmas Eve was still rippling. Sophia and her parents had lost face in their social circles. Whispers spread, not about me, but about them. The truth had a way of slipping through cracks, carried in the murmurs of disappointed friends. Ryan called once. I didn't answer. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. Instead, I turned inward, focusing on what Maria had always wanted, a life lived with dignity. I fixed the porch light I had ignored for years. I repainted the kitchen in the color Maria once loved. I even booked a trip, nothing extravagant, just a few days by the coast. But it was mine, paid for with my own money, my own choice. At church, people gave me cautious looks at first. Some had read the article. But slowly, as word spread, as truth seeped out, their glances softened. A few even approached me saying, "We heard what really happened. Good for you, standing up for yourself." It wasn't vindication in the paper. It wasn't a headline clearing my name, but it was enough. My reputation didn't need the city's approval. It only needed my own. One evening, I sat by the fireplace, with Maria's photo beside me. I poured a glass of that whiskey again, the one we had saved for a special occasion. "This is it, Maria," I said softly. "Not their house, not their approval. This life I'm rebuilding. This is our legacy." The flames flickered, warm against my face. For the first time in 8 long years, I didn't feel alone. I felt reborn. Spring came early that year in Spokane. Snow melted from the sidewalks, revealing cracks in the pavement, stubborn weeds pushing through with a kind of quiet defiance. I found myself walking those sidewalks often, breathing the crisp air, watching children ride bikes, listening to the ordinary hum of life. And I thought, I'm still here. So much had been taken from me. Money, dignity, even my place at my son's table. But I was still alive, still capable of rebuilding. In the silence of my home, I had discovered something unexpected. Strength. I sat many evenings by the fireplace, Maria's photo beside me. I would speak to her, sometimes in whispers, sometimes aloud. I told her about the pain, the betrayal, the humiliation. But I also told her about Rosa's tamales, about the laughter of children, about the small joys I had reclaimed. I thought our legacy was money, I admitted to her picture one night. I thought helping Ryan buy that house was the best way to honor you. But I see now, it was never about money. It was about dignity. About love freely given, not exploited. About knowing when to say, enough. The words hung in the air, heavy and freeing all at once. I began writing notes, pages upon pages. At first, they were for me. Scraps of memory, fragments of thought. But over time, they became something larger. I wrote about sacrifice, how it can be noble, but also dangerous. I wrote about the thin line between generosity and self-erasure. I wrote about Maria's wisdom, about Ryan's silence, about Sophia's greed. Most of all, I wrote about choice, the choice to stop being used, the choice to walk away. One evening, I shared some of those notes at church. My pastor had asked if I wanted to give a short testimony. My hands shook as I spoke, my voice cracking at first. But as I went on, I saw nods in the crowd. Eyes glistened with recognition. People understood. They too had given too much. They too had felt invisible in their own families. Afterward, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I was the only one." And in that moment, I realized my pain had purpose. My story wasn't just mine. It was a mirror for countless others. Ryan called again weeks later. I let it go to voicemail. His message was hesitant, heavy. "Dad, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to try. Please." I listened in silence, my heart torn. Forgiveness was possible. Forgetting was not. But I had learned something vital. Family is not just blood. Family is anyone who sees your worth without demanding proof. Family is Rosa's children calling me Grandpa Ed. Family is the neighbor who brings soup when you're sick, the friend who sits in silence with you, the church member who hugs you without asking questions. For so long, I had chained my identity to Ryan, believing that being a father meant giving until nothing remained. But fatherhood, I realized, was not martyrdom. It was love. And love without respect is not love at all. So I redefined family. And in doing so, I redefined myself. One afternoon, as I sorted through Maria's old belongings, I found a letter she had written years ago. It was tucked inside her Bible, pages yellowed with time. "My dearest Edward," it began, "if you are reading this, I want you to remember something. Our worth is not in what we give away, but in who we are. Money comes and goes, but dignity, that is forever. Promise me you'll never forget that." Tears blurred the words. It was as if she had reached across time to remind me of the lesson I had nearly lost. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the Bible, and whispered, "I promise." From that day on, I stopped thinking of myself as the man who had been humiliated. I started thinking of myself as the man who had survived, who had reclaimed his dignity, who had chosen to live again. That was my legacy. Not the money, not the humiliation, but the resurrection of my own soul. The following Sunday, I was asked again to share at church. This time, I didn't bring notes. I didn't need them. I walked to the pulpit slowly, the murmurs of the congregation fading into silence. I looked out at the faces, neighbors, friends, strangers. Some had read the newspaper's lies. Some had heard whispers of the Christmas Eve confrontation. All of them, I knew, carried their own scars. "I want to tell you a story," I began. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. For 5 years, I gave everything I had to my son and his wife. Money, time, dignity. I told myself it was love. But what I learned is this. Love without respect is not love. It is slavery. A hush fell. Eyes widened. I continued. I let myself be erased. I thought sacrifice would save my family. Instead, it nearly destroyed me. But then I remembered something my wife once wrote. Our worth is not in what we give away, but in who we are. I paused, letting the words settle. I tell you this because some of you are where I was. You are giving and giving and giving, and you are afraid that if you stop, you will lose everything. But I promise you, losing yourself is worse. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others wiped tears. Stand up, I said, my voice firm now, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in dignity. Because dignity is the legacy you leave behind. Money will vanish. Houses will crumble. But dignity outlives us all. When I stepped down, people rose to their feet. Not applause, no, something deeper. A standing recognition that truth had been spoken aloud. That evening, I sat once more by my fireplace. Maria's photo on the mantel, her Bible open to the page with her letter. Outside, the first blossoms of spring swayed in the breeze. I poured a final glass of whiskey from the bottle we had saved. I lifted it high. To legacy, I whispered. Not theirs, not the false image they tried to build, but mine, ours, the legacy of truth. I sipped, the burn warm and steady. I imagined Maria beside me, smiling. I imagined the laughter of Rosa's children echoing through the house, the hum of life returning where silence once ruled. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Not because I had destroyed my enemies, but because I had reclaimed myself, and that, I knew, was the sweetest revenge of all. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Tuesday. Ryan held it in trembling hands, the bold black letters screaming at him, "Final demand for payment." The mortgage he had once boasted about, the house he had flaunted as proof of success, was crumbling beneath him. Sophia screamed at him that night, her voice a shrill blade slicing through the silence of their immaculate kitchen. She blamed him for everything. For the money drying up, for the humiliation at Christmas, for the whispers in social circles that now avoided them like plague. By Thursday, Sophia had packed a suitcase. Her heels clicked against the marble floor Edward had paid for as she walked out without looking back. "You're nothing without your father," she hissed, her perfume lingering like poison in the air. Ryan sat alone in the cavernous house. The granite countertops gleamed under sterile light, but the silence was suffocating. He thought of the meals his mother had once cooked in their modest home. Tamales steaming in foil, laughter echoing through a small, warm kitchen. Here, in this palace of borrowed wealth, there was only emptiness. 3 months had aged him decades. His once confident stride was gone, replaced by slumped shoulders and hollow eyes, dark circles carved into his face. He had lost not only his wife, but also the respect of his peers, the security of his home, and the illusion of success. All that remained was shame. And beneath the shame, a gnawing truth. He had betrayed his father. On a damp Thursday evening, Ryan stood outside Edward's house. The paint was chipped, the porch light flickered, but to Ryan, it looked like sanctuary. He raised his hand to knock and hesitated. Memories surged. His father painting that porch with Maria years ago, Ryan as a boy running in circles while they laughed. He had traded all of that for marble and chandeliers and lost. Finally, he knocked. The sound was small, almost apologetic. Inside, Edward rose slowly from his armchair. He had been reading, Maria's photo watching over him from the mantel. When he opened the door, he was not surprised. He had been expecting this day. Ryan stood there, clutching the foreclosure letter like a death certificate. His voice cracked. "Dad." We need to talk. Edward stepped aside. Come in. The living room was warm, the fire crackling softly. Ryan sat on the couch, his hands shaking as he unfolded the letter. They're taking the house, he whispered. $8,000 in arrears. 14 days to pay or it's gone. Edward nodded, his face unreadable. I know. Tears welled in Ryan's eyes. Sophia left. She said I was nothing without you. She was right. I let her use you. I let her turn me against you. And now I have nothing. Edward said nothing, letting the silence stretch. Ryan's words spilled out like a dam breaking. I was weak, he sobbed. I was so afraid of losing her approval, of disappointing her parents. They made me feel small. And I thought if I gave them everything, if I stood with them, I'd finally be enough. And in doing that, I threw you away. My own father, the man who gave me everything. I didn't just lose you, I gave you up. And now I don't know how to live with myself. His shoulders shook as he buried his face in his hands. Edward sat quietly, studying the broken man before him. In Ryan's trembling frame, he no longer saw the arrogant son who had cast him aside, but the frightened boy who once clutched his hand at the doctor's office, afraid of needles. Finally, Edward spoke. His voice was steady, but heavy with truth. You didn't lose me, Ryan. You gave me away. There's a difference. Ryan looked up, eyes red. Edward leaned forward. I forgave you months ago. But forgiveness does not mean things go back to the way they were. I will not pay your debts. I will not fund your pride. If you want redemption, you must build it with your own hands. Ryan swallowed hard. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Perhaps not, Edward replied. But forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. I chose peace. Now you must choose who you want to become. The words struck Ryan like hammer blows, breaking him open. For the first time, he saw his father not as a resource, not as a bank, but as a man. A man who had bled for him, suffered for him, and finally stood tall again. Ryan's voice trembled. Is there any chance? Any way? We can start over? Edward's gaze softened, just slightly. He gestured toward Maria's photo. Your mother believed in second chances. If you want to rebuild, then prove it. Not with money. With respect. Ryan nodded slowly, the weight of years pressing down. For the first time, he understood the cost of dignity and the pricelessness of love. Ryan stayed for hours that night, talking quietly with his father. They spoke not of money, but of memories. Of Maria's laughter, of fishing trips, of childhood Christmases when love was enough. When he finally rose to leave, Edward walked him to the door. Ryan turned, his voice low. Dad, I was proud of you that night. Christmas Eve, you stood up for yourself. I was angry, embarrassed, but deep down, I was proud. Edward nodded. Good. Hold on to that. Let it guide you. Ryan stepped into the night, shoulders straighter than when he had arrived. The road ahead would be hard. Selling the house, finding steady work, learning humility. But for the first time in years, he carried something real. Hope. After Ryan left, Edward poured a glass of whiskey and sat by the fire. Maria's letter lay open beside him, her words echoing. Our worth is not in what we give away, but in who we are. He raised the glass. He's learning, Maria. Slowly. Maybe he'll understand one day what legacy truly means. The flames flickered warmly, dancing shadows across the walls. Outside, spring rain tapped gently against the windows, a rhythm of renewal. Edward smiled faintly. He had reclaimed his dignity, found new family in unexpected places, and watched his son take the first steps toward redemption. His story was no longer one of humiliation, but of resurrection. And in that, he saw Maria's wisdom fulfilled. Dignity was forever, If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next sweet revenge story. Tell me in the comments, have you ever given too much to someone who didn't value you? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Your stories matter. They might inspire someone else who feels invisible right now. And don't forget to share this video with a friend who needs the reminder. Dignity is the greatest legacy we can leave behind. I'll see you in the next story.